First of all, I want to say the beginning of your podcast, the way you've put that together, it's like we're getting ready to watch a really good movie, and it's going
That's
to be
right.
a good movie. Miss
Whatever it
LP, she's keeping you in line. She's keeping you in line. We appreciate her so much.
is. That's my girl. Welcome to the Trigger Warning Talk podcast, where we have uncensored conversations, we exchange information, and we provide all kind of resources for the listeners and the viewers of this international podcast. I am LP, your Firemedic CEO host, back again with part 5 in our continuing series called Stigmas, Taboos, and Stereotypes, World Childhood Domestic Violence and Traumas, with childhood trauma expert, my sister, Leah Abraham. Leah, you're back in the building. Part 5. We're going to just jump into it. If people want to know who you are and where you are and what it is about you that keeps me bringing you back, there's a QR code that shows your Instagram page. First and foremost, I want to start off by introducing you properly. Leah Abraham, childhood trauma expert, creator of the 5-Step Healing Program. Also, an ACEs ambassador. What is ACEs, you say? You ask? ACEs, the Adverse Childhood Experiences. This book that I'm holding in my hand, so for all the viewers, and I want people to watch all these episodes, this book is called It's a Time to Talk About Adverse Childhood Experiences, or ACEs as we call it, by Dr. Tori McDonald Williams. Dr. Tori is one of the people that's been a contributor to the Trigger Warning Talk podcast. We did a 3-part series. I'm working on part 4, where we were talking about everything about adverse childhood experiences. You got a chance to meet her in person earlier this year. You became, like I became, an ACEs ambassador. Tell us about what is an ACEs ambassador, and then we're just going to jump into it.
Sounds good, LP. Thank you for having me again for the 5th time. I was thinking about that today. I was like, is this our 5th or our 6th conversation? Because we've had a lot of these now. And prepping for today, I was listening back to some of our previous recordings, and they're so good, LP. I appreciate the topics that you bring and the questions you ask, because it's your questioning and the space that you hold that brings out the best in us sometimes. So thank you for having me on again on your platform. I love being here. Dr. Tori, she's amazing, and she is kind of this leader of this movement of collecting these amazing individuals who are now ACEs ambassadors. And what an ACEs ambassador is someone who is talking about their adverse childhood experiences, doing the work for themselves, and bringing that education into their communities and the spaces where they're showing up. And so in that sense, yes, I am an ACEs ambassador, because adverse childhood experiences, the traumas that we've experienced in our childhood is what shapes the adults that we are today. And so it's really important to make that connection between the experiences we had in our childhood and who we are as adults today. So she's given us sort of that platform and that framework of how to do that. Her book that you held up there, a beautiful framework of what do we do now? Okay, we're aware that we have this childhood trauma in our past. What do we do now? And so her book is a wonderful guideline for that. And she's bringing us together to educate the masses and to bring ACEs education worldwide. So that's what we're doing. And I'm passionate about that.
I want to bring up on the screen this LinkedIn article that I sent to you, written by a guy who is an expert in domestic violence and justice reform and expert witness expert. His name is Eric Threlkel, and he wrote this article on domestic violence shelters, a lifeline we cannot afford to take for granted. And he says, for thousands of survivors every year, a domestic violence shelter is more than just a building. It is the first safe night's sleep in months. It's a place where a mother can tuck her children into bed without fear. It is where someone begins to heal, rebuild, and build in their future again. These shelters are not, quote, just a resource. They are a lifeline. They offer safety, counseling, legal advocacy, and connection to services that help survivors move from crisis to stability. They exist only because communities choose to support them. When funding is cut, beds disappear. When beds disappear, survivors are forced to choose between homelessness and returning to an abuser. That is not a choice anyone should have to make. We must not take these shelters for granted. They rely on sustained funding, dedicated staff, and volunteers who believe that every person has a right to live free from violence. If we truly want to stand against domestic violence, or DV, we must stand with the shelters that make escape possible, support them, advocate for them, remind others that safety is not a privilege, it is a human right. I want to talk to you about that, specifically where children are involved, because the picture shows a mother and her child in the picture. I want to pass the mic on to you. When you saw that and you listened to that, I want you to give it to me rough, rugged, and raw. Trigger warning. If you're triggered at any point during this podcast and you need help immediately, please call 911. If you don't have an immediate need, but you need help, call 988. That's toll free 24/7 here in the United States. The mic is yours.
So LP, when you sent me that article, my first thoughts were, how many people are educated around domestic violence shelters? Like, how many of us know anything about them within our own communities? Rarely, right? I automatically think, oh, this is not something that that everyone is aware of. So I appreciated the article for bringing awareness to that fact that many times the choice is a shelter or the abuser. Exactly. And so it is important to recognize that those type of places within a community are important, because it takes a village. You know, it takes a healthy community to raise healthy community members, and everyone in your city is part of your community. You know, we may not see it like that, but we're all connected worldwide. You know, we're all connected, but especially within our community. And if there's spaces like that where someone who needs support and help can go, that's going to benefit the entire community. And especially when you think of the children, right? Because having a safe place to sleep and to eat and to spend time as a family is important and necessary for a child's healthy development. So that was the first thing that came to mind. The second thing is, let's talk about that. Why are the only options for a mother in a domestic violence situation, why are the only options shelter, abuser, or the street? You know, because people will say, well, you know, she could get a job, all this, blah, blah, blah. But here's the thing. Many times when you're coming from a situation like domestic violence, you are very limited in the resources that you have and your ability to go outside and support yourself. You know, you are dependent on that abuser, especially financially. So that's really important to think about when there's I'm saying woman, you know, it can be man too, but we're talking about women and children, particularly in this conversation. So when a woman is involved in a situation like that, she is limited with her resources and dependent financially most times on her abuser. So if there is not a place that is going to provide her basic needs to be met for free, she's in a very difficult situation, right? Like her options are very limited. And especially when you have a young child, when you have dependents that need your care, that's a whole nother issue, because you can't just go and find work and work these hours. You have to think about, what am I going to do with my children while I'm trying to find work or while I'm at work? You know, it's a whole it's a whole nother ball game. So if you have been dependent on your abuser for all of these years, and you are financially dependent on your abuser, and you don't have a place to go, your options are very limited. So that's kind of what comes to my mind, that mothers who are in domestic violence relationships, they do have limited options, and they need the support of their communities.
I didn't even think about that part of it. What do you do with the child when the parent has to go to work? Because we know in a lot of situations, unfortunately, these kids, and this is part of where the ACEs conversation comes into play, they are getting abused. You know, if the mom's getting abused, in a lot of
There's
cases,
abuse happening, because even if they're not physically being hurt themselves, they are witnessing. And we know
they're
that's an
with.
ACE, right?
Woo! So let's go to the other point that he made when he was talking about the advocacy. How do you look at advocacy specifically when we're talking about children experiencing domestic violence in a shelter, right? Because let me say this. As a paramedic, even though I'm retired, I never responded to a call at a domestic violence shelter for any type of emergency. But I've been to domestic violence shelters where parents and their children were. I knew a couple of women who lived in the shelter some years ago. And I always think about stuff that, like when I teach my CPR classes, I say people that don't have any medical training tend to resort to doing the things that they see on the Grey's Anatomy or the 911 shows if they happen to witness or be pulled in to help somebody who's hurt, injured, dying, or dead. In a shelter situation, I just think about the stuff that I've seen on Law and Order SVU or some of these other shows where the parent and the kid are there and they got to sleep with all their clothes on. Everything has to be in their cot or their bed. They're like sleeping with one or both eyes open because they're making sure nobody's coming over to cop a field or cop a steal or both. You know, they have some type of weapon on them, you know, typically some type of sharp pointy object just to fight off or fend off any potential attacker. In a shelter situation, you would think that you wouldn't hear or see a lot of these issues or events happening. How do you think the advocacy should work in terms of the safety in those facilities?
That's an interesting question, LP. Like, what comes to my mind immediately is when there's domestic violence, that's a massive rupture, right? Within relationships, within our experience, it's a rupture. And what can happen after a rupture is the repair. And so when a relationship or a family has been ruptured with domestic violence and that mother takes her children to a shelter, that's where the repair can happen. So I'm not surprised that you haven't been called out to the shelters, because mothers are working on the repair when they're there, because they finally have a safe place to do that, a safe place to have a conversation with their children, to allow their child to cry, for them to cry, to sleep without, you know, that fear or whatever. And so so that doesn't surprise me that you haven't been called out to shelters, because I think repair is taking place because there's enough safety where some level of repair can happen. And keeping that safety for those mothers and families within that shelter is key, right? Without the safety, nothing can change, because your nervous system will not be able to rest. You will not be able to fully rest. And if you're always on guard or worried or scared, in fear, there's not going to be that space to think creatively about what's next. Like, how can I, you know, better my situation? You can't think about anything else except for your survival. So in terms of safety within these domestic violence shelters, like, that's key. I think, you know, security measures are important, ensuring that nobody is allowed in there that isn't already authorized and that's not supposed to be there. and having support for the mothers, places where they can express their concerns, and those concerns can be heard and helped. That right there is absolutely vital. And then the resources, the resources that a mother with children needs, the food, where's the food coming from? Where's the clothing coming from? Where's the child's care coming from if their age of education? What does that look like? You talk about, I mentioned if a mom is looking for work or whatever, where do those children go? That's another thing is, any daycare, any type of childcare requires that you have a physical address, that you're you have certain things in place. And a lot of people who are coming from domestic violence relationships, who are fresh out of leaving them, they don't have those things in place. So helping a mother get the paperwork that's necessary to have support for her children while she's looking for work, that's important too, because you think about a mom who's coming out of that, who's coming out of somewhere that she's known for however many years, no matter how awful it is, it's still a transition into a new space. It's still very scary to leave your home or what you've always known. So it's very scary to do something completely different, be in a shelter. It may be a physically safer place, but mentally it's still very scary because it's all new. It's nothing is familiar. You are still that child's, you are still responsible for your babies, for your children. You are still responsible for providing for their needs. So there is so much that a woman leaving a domestic violence relationship is dealing with already. So really, those shelters should just be that sanctuary, that safe space where she can take a breath and sleep and, not be afraid of being harmed. And then once that nervous system regulates and there's a little bit of, consistency and a little bit of built up safety within her family, then those other options can be explored and resources for those should be available. That's my thoughts on that from just having this question being asked right now. Those are my thoughts. Yeah.
On the screen here, I pulled up this link that you sent me, and it says local resource for survivors. This is from thehotline.org. Thehotline.org. It is part of the National Domestic Violence Hotline. And it says local providers help where you need it. If you put in a zip code, it gives you all kind of resources. I want to put in my old zip code when I was living in St. Louis. Okay, 63115. That's in North City, St. Louis. Okay, the loop. And then I hit search. So it has services, any services. You have shelters, basic needs, crisis support, mental health / counseling, financial aid, legal help, sexual assault, youth services. And it says local service providers offer direct support to those affected by domestic violence. These providers offer essential services such as emergency shelter, counseling, financial aid, and legal advocacy to help survivors find safety and heal from the effects of abuse. Service providers offer compassionate care tailored to the specific needs of the local communities they service. To access information on the current state coalitions, please visit State Domestic Violence Coalitions. I want to add that link to the show notes here in a moment. But let me go back to my old zip code, 63115, St. Louis, Missouri. I click on that, I hit return, and it gives me 20 results in the St. Louis metro area, including the east side, as we call it, Illinois, because St. Louis sits right at the state line of between the Mississippi River. You have Missouri and Illinois, so it sits right on the other side of East St. Louis. So it gives you, we call it the bi-state area. So it talks about Providence Behavioral Health, Violence Prevention Center of Southwestern Illinois. Think about Belleville and the Kathy J. Wyman Shelter, Metro East. So this will be on the east side. Every Metro East, Every Survivor Counts, Life Source Consultants. They got a bunch of, like I said, 20 different resources that are available for people in that bi-state area. I want to put in a zip code for where I moved when we first came to North Carolina. This is South Charlotte, in one of the most prominent neighborhoods in North Carolina called Ballantyne. 16 results. Legal aid of North Carolina, specifically Gastonia, which is the neighboring county west of Mecklenburg County, which is Charlotte. Then there is Safe Alliance. There's all kinds of stuff. Safe Passage, Charlotte Center for Legal Advocacy, Turning Point, 20 different ones. Give me a zip code in your neck of the woods.
Okay, 87123.
87123. Because that's why y'all need to watch these podcast interviews, because we bring it, okay? We love our listeners, but we want you to see the stuff that we show on the screen. And I'll put all these links in the show notes here. Okay, let's see. 87123. 11 results. New Mexico Legal Aid. They have offices in Albuquerque, Clovis, Gallup, Las Cruces, Las Vegas, Roswell, Santa Ana, Santa Fe, Silver City, and Tahoe. Rio Rancho Family Health, Rape Crisis Center of Central New Mexico, Torrance County Domestic Violence Program, Catholic Charities. They got all kind of stuff here. Do you recognize any of these places?
I'm not too sure, LP. Like I said, I don't do too much work with my local domestic violence shelters. Okay. That they exist here, but I've never done any work directly with them, so I'm not too familiar.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
You and I talked about, you said there's a large DV problem in the Albuquerque area.
Yeah.
What do you see that you would like to highlight in terms of being an advocate for those survivors in your neck of the woods? Like, what can we do besides posting a link to some of these services, and in terms of raising awareness? Like, what else can we do? Because I feel like we're not doing enough.
So LP, I think, like where my mind always goes is doing our own work as individuals. So your podcast, Stigmas, Taboos, Stereotypes, I like to address those things, because when we're thinking about domestic violence, we're thinking about there's one person who's the abuser and there's one person who is being abused, right? And this person's good. But we're talking about the children. The children see, that's my dad and that's my mom. I want to remove those stigmas, those taboos around it, and realize that everyone involved in a domestic violence situation needs and deserves help. Everyone involved, the abuser included, because the abuser is abusing because of their own unprocessed stuff, their inability to cope with their emotions, their triggers from the outside. And I'm not excusing any of that. And I'm not saying that we need to keep them together. The separation is necessary. But where the mother and the child are being supported, they have their safe space. What about that abuser? Are they being supported anyway? Most likely not. They're being prosecuted. They're being put into the system. So what I would like to see, and what I advocate for, is the healing of families, the healing of individuals, because what benefits a child most is a healthy environment with two healthy parents. Like, and granted, that's, perhaps like a big wish, but that's where we should set our sights, right? That's where we should set our sights, that every child deserves a safe home environment with, and I'm not saying it has to be a 2-parent household or whatever, but with a parent who is capable of providing for their emotional needs. That's what I would like to see more of, that there's advocacy for the children, there's advocacy for the mothers, and there's advocacy for those abusers who also deserve healing and help. How do we do that? I mean, I do that through my work. You mentioned my 5-step healing process. That's a process that I walk people through that helps them understand the disconnection that happens within us on an individual level as a result of ACEs, of adverse childhood experiences, and what that disconnect looks like, how it happens, and how we reconnect back to ourselves, back to our values, back to the ability to love who we are and the ability to share love out to others. That's what I would like to see more of. But it begins with education, right? It begins with building an awareness around these things. It begins by doing what we can. And I love that you use that site as an example. Type in any zip code, there's going to be some resources. So that's wonderful to know that there are resources available. And here in Albuquerque, we have a lot of public libraries, and I think those are important because you and I, we can get on that site, we can type in our zip code, we can hit search, we can do all of it right here. But most of the people who are coming from those trauma environments, those domestic abuse environments, they may not have that type of access or ability to find resources as easily as we can. So I like that we have a lot of those free resources for our homeless community, for the mothers in shelters, and for anyone who needs it. So more things like that within our communities that are inclusive of and there to support all community members. Because like I said, like everyone that lives in your city is part of your larger community. That's right. Regardless of if we want to accept that or not, we're all included. Everybody in the city is part of our community, essentially, like extended community, but still part of it. So having those types of resources for everybody to use, I think, is important, so that they can access and find help, seek help, and find the help that they're looking for, and reach out to those different organizations. I think you talked about advocacy, having someone who knows these systems, who knows how to process paperwork, who knows the right questions to ask, how to fill everything out. That's important too, because sometimes they're coming from having no education or elementary education, and they may not know how to fill out the paperwork that is needed to receive the assistance. So having that type of support within the communities is important. And I think I was looking on the shelters, they have things like that, support to help find the resources that you need. So those things are key. And what that comes down to is the individuals who are a part of this community, who are working for those organizations, who are working for the shelters, who are volunteering in those spaces, being the voice for those and advocating for those who don't have that in their life. The children, the mothers, those abused, those abusers who may be struggling with their own addictions or...
This is the Trigger Wanna Talk podcast. We are talking about stigmas, taboos, and stereotypes, world childhood, domestic violence, and traumas. This is part 5 with childhood trauma expert and ACEs ambassador and my contributor and my partner and my sister, Leah Abraham. I'm going to read something that I just saw on the CDC's website, and I have it on the screen here real quick, and then I'm going to jump over to the worldwide conversation. According to Microsoft Bing, they said that world childhood domestic violence and ACEs. They said childhood domestic violence, or DV, is a significant issue globally, with adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, being a major contributing factor. ACEs are traumatic events that occur in childhood and can have long-term negative impacts on health, opportunity, and well-being. They include experiences such as violence, abuse, neglect, and witnessing DV. And you talk about that. Talk about all of those things just in this past 30 minutes. Research indicates that ACEs are common, with many children experiencing at least one adverse experience before turning 18. At least one, Leah. These experiences can lead to various health issues, including physical and mental health problems. It can also affect future opportunities, and preventing ACEs is crucial as it can reduce the risk of developing health conditions such as depression, obesity, and diabetes in adulthood. Now, I want you to hold there because I also want to share with you this other story that I just saw. This is from the World Health Organization. They have all kind of good information and resources about anything related to ACEs, violence, all those things. Violence against children. This is from the World Health Organization. This was posted on November 29th, 2022 from the WHO, the WHO.int. So that's the World Health Organization. Key facts about violence against children. Violence against children includes all forms of violence against people under 18 years old, whether perpetrated by parents or other caregivers, peers, romantic or intimate partner, or we call it IPV, intimate partner violence, or strangers. Another bullet. Globally, it is estimated that up to 1 billion, with a B as in Bravo, children ages 2 through 17 have experienced physical, sexual, or emotional violence or neglect in the past year. Another bullet point. Experiencing violence in childhood impacts lifelong health and well-being. Another bullet point. Target 16.2 of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is to, quote, end abuse, exploitation, trafficking, and all forms of violence against and torture of children. And the last bullet point, it says evidence from around the world shows that violence against children can be prevented. It goes into great depth about the types of violence against children. And there's at least one of the 6 main types of interpersonal violence that occur in different stages of a child's development. So this gets into the ACEs, Leah. Maltreatment, including violent punishment, physical and sexual, psychological, emotional. It talks about bullying, including cyberbullying. It talked about youth violence that's concentrated among children and adults between the ages of 10 to 29, and that often occurs in community settings between acquaintances and strangers, with or without weapons. May involve gang violence. Another thing, it talks about IPV, intimate partner violence. It talks about sexual violence, including non-sensual consent, attempted sexual contact. Emotional or psychological violence include restricting a child's movement, denigration, ridicule, threats, all of these things. I want you to talk about when you see and hear just those 6 things that I talked about from an ACEs ambassador's perspective. How would you educate people in terms of talking about how we should address those issues from an ACEs perspective?
Okay. I want to just highlight some of the things that stood out to me as you were speaking.
Yeah. I love when you mind now.
So, this number, 1 billion children experiencing abuse. And in that, it talked about physical, verbal, sexual, it says, and torture. And so I thought to myself, and torture, my gosh.
And torture.
Yeah, and torture. So I looked that up. The action or practice of inflicting severe pain or suffering on someone as a punishment or in order to force them to do or say something. So torturing children, you know what I mean? It's like, why are we such a violent race? And that's the question that comes to me. It's like, children are so innocent and pure and sweet. And how can an adult get to a point where we can torture a child, where in our mind we think this is what has to happen? Even just verbal abuse. In Motivational Mondays with Jorge, we touched on the 7th question on the ACEs questionnaire, which is verbal abuse. And even verbal abuse, the harm that it does to an individual. And I talked about that disconnection that happens between ourselves as a result of trauma. And you say that the fact states that before a child reaches the age of 18, they at least have 1 ACE. So
at least one.
And all it takes is one of those experiences to create a disconnect within us, where we're no longer connected to who we are, where we're no longer connected to our intuition, where we're no longer connected to our values. Like we don't know who we are anymore because of that disconnection that happens as a result of something severe like a trauma. And so I asked that question: how can an adult get to a place where they think torturing a child is necessary, or even verbally abusing a child is necessary? They get to that point because they are disconnected from themselves, as a result of their own trauma, these cycles that continue. But so how do we stop that? How do we educate around that? Always my answer is going to be on the individual level. We can only have compassion for a child if we have compassion for ourself as a child. And that's what's missing. That's what's missing is we have this trauma in childhood. We're so disconnected from ourselves, and rather than having the support to repair and come back home to ourselves, reconnect with ourselves, rather than have that, the world teaches you, well, you still got to show up, you still got to be perfect, you still got to do all the things, and you got to act like nothing is wrong. So rather than work on connecting back, reconnecting, the repair that happens as a result of the trauma rupture, we work on, how do I wear the mask? How do I escape the pain? And so instead of like healing, we're doing the opposite, right? We're being inauthentic. We are finding ourselves lost in addictions, ways to cope with our pain. We're going against the things that we value, and that leads us to these places where we're beating our own children because we forget how it felt. So my simple solution, and truth is always simple, is it happens internal. Like we each as individuals, no matter what position in society we hold, no matter what role we play within the constructs of our family system or our societal system, it doesn't matter. Like it's a personal choice to do our own healing, and it has to be done. The big change that we need in the world has to be done on an individual personal level. Like we have to heal and bring ourselves back connected to who we are, to our authenticity, to our deeper knowings, to reconnection with our values, reconnection to our intuition, reconnection to that knowing that we're all connected, yes. and that's what's going to change the world. And it is, there are many people who are being awakened, if you want to use that term. I like to use the word that are healing and have awareness and are now seeing with eyes of clarity instead of that denial and the illusion, that we learn to wear through the mask. So it's happening, but the big change that the world needs has to happen on the individual level. Like it has to happen on the individual level. So that's like when I hear these statistics, one ACE before the age of 18, that's all it takes is one traumatic experience to create the disconnection. And then if there's no support or no guidance to help you process through that, we recreate the same patterns. All right, learn to wear the mask, learn to survive and stay disconnected. And then you have this beautiful child who's so innocent and precious and sweet and pure. And you can't receive that. You can't receive that because you're so closed off. You're so closed off from feeling in general. Like we want to numb our pain, but in numbing our pain, we're also numbing our ability to experience joy and deeper levels of love. So it's like we have to recognize that through that survival and that learning of how to wear the mask and learning how to like do all the things in this world, we stay safe, because we don't have to feel like we use outside things to numb our pain. but we're also numbing our ability to see how beautiful our child is right in front of us. Instead, we're triggered by the child. You know, they have a need, they cry for something, and instead of like being like, what's wrong, my sweet precious baby, we're like, you're triggering me and I don't know how to deal with that, so you're the problem. I'm gonna beat you and torture you. Like, what? But that's what it is. Like, you break it down that simply, and that's what it is. Like, we're triggered by our children rather than, you know, getting to experience those deeper levels of the gift that they are, you know? So the healing has to happen on an individual level, on a personal level. We have to get to the point where we can acknowledge what happened to us in childhood before we can advocate and stand up for our own child.
Stigmas, taboos, and stereotypes. World Childhood Domestic Violence and Traumas, Part 5, focusing on ACEs. Okay, I'm going to update the title, okay, because Dr. Tori will love that. Well, I always like making my Missouri sister smile. Okay. I want to go back to that article. Okay, and let me pull it back up because I didn't get a chance to read the whole thing, and I was like, "Oh, wait a minute, I missed something." They got a prevention and response that they posted in the same article, and again, I'll post this in the show notes for this. They talked about violence against children can be prevented, and it requires efforts that systematically address the risks and protective factors at all 4 interrelated levels of risk, which is individual, relationship, community, and society, like you were talking about. Under the leadership of WHO, a group of 10 international agencies have developed and endorsed an evidence-based technical package called INSPIRE, 7 strategies for ending violence against children. And each letter of the word INSPIRE stands for one of the strategies, and most have shown or have been shown to have preventative effects across several different types of violence, as well as benefits in areas such as mental health, education, and crime reduction. The 7 strategies are: I, implementation and enforcement of laws, for example, banning violent discipline and restricting access to alcohol and firearms. I can do a whole podcast on just the restricting access to alcohol, specifically with the firearms, because, you know, I deal with that from a tactical EMS perspective. N, norms and values change. For example, altering norms that condone the sexual abuse of girls and aggressive behavior among boys. You know, that makes me think about something that Mrs. LP taught me some years ago. She said, when it comes to girls and what they dress, she said, of course, you want to be appropriate for wherever you go. But she said, I want you to look at it from a different perspective. It shouldn't matter what a girl wears, because no matter what she wears, if she were to walk in a room bucket naked, that does not give anybody the right to touch her. Now, people can say what they want to say. However, there still should be some decorum, because if that girl did walk in there with a thong showing or super mini skirt on, that's her right to wear that. And if it's not violating the dress code or wherever she is, everybody should keep doing what they're doing, in terms of that does not give you a right to abuse, misuse, and discriminate or treat a person adversely. It's like, oh, damn. Which is, now, I didn't say it like that. However, as I was raising my boys, because I have 5 boys, and then our daughter Lucy is the youngest, I told them something very similar to that. S, safe environments, such as identifying neighborhood hotspots for violence and then addressing the local causes through problem-oriented policing and other interventions. I'm working on that as a retired first responder, because I can talk with these other first responders, especially when we're talking about community-oriented policing services or cops. P, parental and caregiver support. For example, providing parent training to young first-time parents. That's always important, because there's no book on parenting. Okay, it's a work in progress continuously. I, here's another I. Income and economic strengthening, such as microfinance and gender equity training. I need to do a little bit more research on that. R, response service provision. For example, ensuring that children who are exposed to violence can access effective emergency care and receive appropriate psychosocial support. Now, that link for the local resources where we put in the zip code, when you first go to that site, it has and I showed it on the screen for those that want to watch it. It had a pop-up that said, if you click on the red X or you click on another button, I can't remember what it said a couple times, it will contact any a hotline or a person from that hotline organization to give you some type of aid. And then E, education and life skills such as ensuring that children attend school and providing life and social skills training. When you think about those 7 strategies, what say you, Miss Childhood Trauma Expert?
What say you? Two things stood out to me when you were talking about this example of a woman should be able to wear whatever she wants to wear and feel safe. We had this conversation in Trauma Drama last Thursday. We were talking about sexuality. That question of, are you born gay, or did your trauma make you gay? Like, we explored that, and one of the things that came up through that conversation is how important having gay men in my life has been to my healing. So, and that example you gave right there was one of the examples that I used, because if I feel like I look super cute and I'm in this tiny little dress and I'm creatively expressing myself, and I go into a room with straight men, I might not feel that safe. I might begin to question, like, maybe I shouldn't have worn this, or, oh, I'm setting myself up for something or whatever. But you wear that same thing around your gay friends and they say, oh, girl, you look so good. And it builds confidence. And that is what, and so that conversation was the importance of having gay men as friends to teach the nervous system what it feels like to be safe around a man. Like, that was important for my healing. And now, of course, I have straight men who are friends, and I have found safety in those relationships, but it was necessary for my nervous system to learn what that felt like before I could establish those relationships, those friendships with straight men. And that's a perfect example, because the way that we dress is an extension of our creative expression. And there is never anything wrong with someone's creative expression, and if you feel comfortable and confident in expressing yourself in that way, that's it, period. That's it. That's it. And if someone has an opinion about it, that's their opinion. That's fine. People are welcome to their own opinions, but never does it open the door for abuse. Never open the door for abuse. So that came up for me as you were speaking, and then that saying, we hear it all the time, and I used to say it all the time too, until I met Mama B, Mabato. Do you remember Mama B?
Oh,
yeah, Mama B. So
Mama B.
That saying that we love to say, well, kids don't come with a handbook, parenting doesn't come with a handbook, but Mama B reminds us that yes, it does. We wrote the handbook. We wrote the handbook in our childhood. We wrote down, I do not like being beat for something I don't understand. I do not like being accused of something because I'm a child. I do not like being treated less than because I'm a child. We wrote the handbook as we were growing up, but it's what I touched on earlier. Rarely do we reference it, because referencing it means that we have to look at our younger self. We have to connect back with our younger self. And as adults, it's better not to connect with the young. Yeah, that's right. We're like, no, I'm not going to.
The flavor class, the flavor, rejected.
We're so afraid. We're so afraid to go back there, and rightfully so. That's where all the trauma happened. But there's so much information there. So when we are quick to say, parenting didn't come with a manual, yes, it did. We're just not referencing it. We wrote it. But it's up to us to reference it. So those came up for me as you were sharing those those 7
Oh, 7 strategies, yeah.
the strategies. Yeah, those are the ones that stood out to me the most. It comes back to what I always teach: reconnect to your younger self. Let your younger self tell their story. Let your younger self speak. You know, instead of telling the story from the adult self, the adult who has learned to survive, who has learned to cope, who has a better understanding, who is more emotionally intelligent and can understand, you know, my parents were doing the best they could, you know, this happened. We have an understanding as adults that we did not have as children. So let the child speak, the part of ourself that didn't understand. Let's hear what they have to say. Let's hear what that part of us has to say, how they're going to tell the story. Because there's a lot more information there. There's a lot more to uncover. And then that's where we process, you know, that's where we'll get the opportunity to process the unprocessed stuff that's stored in our body. And that's healing. That's what healing looks like. And if we address it for ourselves, we can address it for other children within our community, within our family.
I want to close with you sharing with us your 5-step healing program, because we always talk about modalities.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to share with us what that is and how people can sign up for that 5-step healing program that you have so beautifully put together. Because we're going to just put a pin in it, because, you know, we can talk about it. We'll be back for part 6 soon. I'm just saying, like my mind is just like ping, 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 ping. My ADD is ticking in. I'm like, ooh, 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 ooh. Whatever it is.
She's keeping you in line. She's keeping you in line. We appreciate her so much.
That's my girl. 5-step healing program. Okay,
Yes.
the mic is yours.
Thank you, LP. So this QR code that LP put up there that links you to my Instagram, that is the best place to create a connection with me, because I post on my stories every day. And if you follow my stories, you get to learn about who I am. You get to learn about my family, about what's important to me. You get to learn about my values. Like if you watch my story, you learn about me. So that's what I tell people all of the time, you know, when people inquire about working with me or something, I say, well, look at my content, watch my stories, and see if you connect to me, because you're only gonna listen to somebody or be open to learning from someone if you connect to them. You know, like if they don't vibe with you, they can be the smartest person in the world and have the best information and the greatest program ever, but if you don't vibe with them, you're not going to receive what you need from them. So the best thing to do is follow me on Instagram, and that way you learn more about who I am, you learn about my values, and you see if we align, and if we vibe. If we do, that is also where you'll see any information about my 5-step program. I usually run that program 2 or 3 times a year. I just finished, we wrapped up in November. So I will do another one in the new year. I haven't set a date for that yet, but find and follow me on Instagram, and you'll see it. Whenever I set that date, I'll start promoting it. And that's how you'll be able to sign up for that. If you are interested. But let's talk about that. The 5-step healing process is a process that I designed and created as a result of my own journey, my own education, the things that I have found are important on this healing journey.
Yes.
And I designed it in a way that removes the fear out of this healing journey, because as we mentioned, you know, we don't want to go there. It's scary. But I've designed this program to meet you where you're at. It is a framework, and you fill in based on where you're at on your unique journey. So you're not going to be forced into something that you're not ready for. You are going to meet yourself where you're at. So the first step is we talk about alignment, and that is the mind, the body, the spirit, being in the present moment, connected together. So we talk about what each one of those parts means to us, And then what alignment feels like for us as an individual. We talk about what unalignment feels like for us as an individual. And we learn how it feels to be aligned and unaligned. If we have an understanding, a knowing about that, it will help us identify when we're triggered, when we are in our addictions. And it helps us identify if we're aligned or unaligned. So that's the very first step, is knowing what it's like to be fully present in this now moment. That's really important.
Okay.
Everything that's happening to us is happening right now, in this moment. Whatever's happened in the past, that's in the past. Whatever's going to happen in the future, it's in the future. But we're creating our life and our experiences right now. So really understanding what it means to be fully present is a good place to start. It's a good place to start, because that helps us to begin building an awareness around our thoughts, our actions, our patterns, our reactions, our responses. So that's a great place to start. Alignment is the first step. Then we move into step 2, which is self-love. And self-love is the acknowledgement of all of our parts. So the acknowledgement of ourself as a child, the acknowledgement of our trauma, the acknowledgement of, whatever we were told in childhood was too much or was not a good quality, like those parts of us that we've like hidden away, or that we don't want to show people, or that we're embarrassed about. Self-love is acknowledging every aspect of who we are, acknowledging it and accepting it. That's the baseline for self-love, is acknowledging something that we've, shut out or discarded, whatever it may be, acknowledging it and accepting it as part of who we are, as part of our experience. And then we move forward from there. So that's what self-love looks like. We do a couple different exercises there where we identify the voice of our inner critic and do a little bit of mirror work and some affirmations. But ultimately, self-love is acknowledging all of your parts. So every aspect, every little piece of who you are, learning to love that, love all those little pieces, whatever they look like. So that's step 2. Step 3 is trauma, where we gain an understanding around that disconnection that happens as a result of trauma. We talked a lot about that in today's conversation. And so it's really just gaining an understanding around how those ACEs in childhood impact us today and what that looks like. So it's an education around that disconnection that happens as a result of trauma. So understanding that, and seeing that, it's not our fault we're disconnected. Like, the trauma caused the disconnection.
Trauma caused the disconnection.
It is our responsibility now to do healing. Step 4 is addiction. So we look at the ways we've learned to cope with our adverse childhood experiences. We all have them. We all have coping mechanisms. And when I say addiction, I'm talking about any pattern that we engage with that is outside of our alignment. So step 1, we learn about that alignment, what that feels like. And step 4, we're exploring, when we're unaligned, where are we? And often in those addictions. And addictions can be thought patterns too. When we go into, I suck, I'm not worthy, I can't do it. That is unalignment, and we're in a different place. So can be an addiction, those thought patterns. And then the 5th step is tools, acknowledging and being aware of all of the tools that we have available, and then building a new tool set based on what we've learned about ourselves through this process. And I really dive deep into the tools aspect around what our passions are, because our passions can be the greatest tools. They are preventative measures. If we reconnect back to things we were passionate about when we were in childhood, and we do more of that, it helps prepare us for when life is lifing. That's what Ray Mallory says. Life always be lifing. So when
That's right. That's my
life
brother.
we're better prepared to handle whatever comes our way, because we're humans. We're in a human experience. There's always going to be challenges and obstacles and things that we face, new levels that we're getting to. But when we utilize those passions of ours, it's like preventative measures, and it sets us up to be able to have that strength and resilience to handle whatever comes our way. So that's the 5 steps. And I'm very proud of the program. You know, I've ran it many times now, and a lot of people within our community have gone through that program. You're next, LP. And, you know, they're utilizing it. Those skills are so vital to understand what alignment is, to work on that self-love piece, which is accepting every part of us,
Yes.
acknowledging our traumas, looking at our addictions. You know, we often just don't want to go there, but it's important to understand, like, addictions are not a bad thing. They started off very useful and helpful to us. So creating a different type of relationship with them can bring us to a healthier place within ourselves around those addictions. And then the tools, you know, we all need support. We all deserve support. And oftentimes we have that support for ourselves if we remember, you know, if we reconnect back to what worked for us. And so it's a great program, and it's my gift to the world. You know, it's how I'm helping people do that healing, that reconnection work within themselves.
Yes.
And I'm very passionate about it. So thank you for letting me share it here today.
Absolutely. And don't forget, every Thursday,
Yes.
you have a Zoom meeting and what we call Drama Thursday. This is right after, and it's 1:30 Eastern Standard Time. It's right after Dr. Tori's Lunch and Learn session on Instagram. Hers is on Instagram. Yours is via Zoom. And there's a link to that meeting on your IG page that I'll put in the show notes. So if you go to Leah Abraham 1111, you'll see that link and you can click on it and it'll take you to the Zoom page. And again, it's Trauma Drama Thursdays every Thursday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's 11:30 a.m. Mountain Time, 10:30 a.m. on the West Coast. And it's for 90 minutes.
Yes.
And we have some very good conversations. You know,
It usually goes up, but we try to keep it to 90 minutes.
About 90 minutes. It could be longer, but hey, you can always leave or come in whenever you want.
Yes,
okay?
It's an open space. You come in,
It's
you
an
go
open space.
as you're
It's
available.
an open space. It's a safe space.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to have a lot of love and support in that space. It's not for therapy, okay? It is not a therapeutic type of session where you have someone giving therapy, okay? That's not what it is. We are communicating and conversing and talking about, and there's always a subtitle or subtext that goes along with it. I want to encourage everybody to go to Leah's IG page, click on that Zoom link, and then join us on Thursdays, and you'll get a lot of information, and you're going to hear a lot of shares from that community that we have built. And this is welcoming. Bring a friend. You know, this is not an exclusive community. Bring a +1. This link, anybody can join in. Okay, so it's all on her social media link.
Yes.
Leah,
Do you mind if I talk about it just for a second, LP? I want to say that, you know, it's almost 5 years now that I've been doing trauma. Almost 5 years, I think in February.
Started in Clubhouse, right?
It started in Clubhouse, yes. And the magic of Clubhouse, I've tried to keep that. So when I say it's an open space, like Clubhouse is, you open a room, and if it's you know, if it's a public room, anyone can come in, listen, and leave when they want. And that's what I mean by it's an open space, because I wanted to keep that same format that, you know, if you get off work a little bit late, the room is not going to be closed to you. You come in, and you'll hear whatever is going on at the time that you enter. If you need to leave, you leave when you need to leave, and and that's fine. So it's an open space like that. So there's no I don't want it to ever feel like, oh, I have to be there, or it's a class, or like I want it to just be an open space where if you feel like coming in and listening to us talk about trauma, in that space we talk about trauma, addiction, specifically sexual abuse trauma. We talk about the healing journey and everything in between. So if you are feeling like you need some of that, you want to listen, or you have something you want to share and contribute in, come into the space. We started in Clubhouse. That was beautiful. We took it to X. We took it to live at the library, and now we're taking it to Zoom, which I found is really great because nothing is recorded. So whatever is in that room stays in that room. So it's very special in that way that you never know what's gonna come out, or who's gonna share, or what they're gonna share, but where it's a non-judgment space where anything you share is listened to and you are supported in that. You're seen, you're heard, you're loved. That's what we all need as human beings. And that is the space that I try to provide, a space where everyone is seen, heard, and loved. So if that's something you're interested in, please join us on Thursdays. Thank you, LP.
No problem. Leah Abraham, childhood trauma expert. We love you, and we want to continue to cover these world childhood domestic violence and traumas, specifically within ACEs, attachment to it. We're going to jump right over to our missing persons case. And what I want to do is I want to bring up a case that I just found in your neck of the woods. I'm just going to read from the poster. This comes from the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children, or ncmec.org. Here's the young woman. See, her name is Anastasia Brenda
Heredia.
Anastasia Ferreira. NCIC number is M as in Mary, 477-302258. Thank you, Leah. Missing since March 15, 2023 in Albuquerque, New Mexico. She's now 22 years of age. They don't have a whole lot of information on her, so I'm just going to give you the NCMEC number is 200-8580. That's the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. File number is 200-8580. If you have any information on Miss Anastasia, you can contact Albuquerque PD in New Mexico at 1-505-242-2677. Again, 505-242-2677. I will post a link to her missing poster in the show notes also. Leah Abraham, I want to thank you again as always. In closing, situational awareness is always important. Take a Stop the Bleed CPR training class. Stop saying active shooter. The whole title is active shooter / hospital events. That covers everything. Think about what happened this year earlier before the Super Bowl, where that guy took his truck and ran through the streets of the French Quarter and killed those 10 people. There was no firearm. Think about what happened here in the Charlotte area a few months ago, where the Ukrainian lady got stabbed in the neck and died. Okay, there was no firearm. Think about what happened in Boston over 15 years ago, the Boston Marathon bombing. Okay, there was no firearm. So these active shooter hostile events do not always involve an active shooter. That's why the title is active shooter / hostile events. The government is supposed to be changing that to violent critical incidents. I want everybody to start saying violent critical incident, because that encompasses everything. It could be a firearm, it could be shooting, it could be a bombing, it could be an explosive. Make sure that you're always aware of your surroundings. These cell phones are great, but you know what? Here's what I see all the time when people are walking. You don't know what's in front of you, beside you, or behind you, because you're all in your phone. You're just on autopilot. And I'm telling you right now, and this even goes for men. Men are becoming more victimized because of cell phone usage, because they're not checking out their surroundings. Okay? So I talk about that. I teach on that. I travel all across the country from the Carolinas to California doing these classes. If you want me to come out and speak to your group, your organization, your nonprofit, your industrial, commercial, residential, or governmental agency, email us at consultingsolutions@pentonpending.com. Again, our email is consultingsolutions@pentonpending.com. For Leah Abraham, not all superheroes wear capes. This is from Mrs. LP. LP out.